It's raining. About time. Now I'm going to look at a subject which at first may not have anything seem to have anything in common, but has everything in common. Now, just in case you didn't know, and obviously most of us didn't know, that the 28th of September 2024 is the 55th anniversary of the arrival of the Murchison meteorite. Murchison is a sleepy little town, less than 1,000 people, in north central Victoria, and on the 28th of September 1969 it was showered by a meteorite which broke up when it entered the atmosphere. It caused a lot of interest. It's one of the first meteorites that people have actually seen land. It's not as big as the Cranbourne meteorite, which landed in 1854, which we think was over a tonne. The Murchison meteorite, the pieces they found equaled about 100 kilograms. Nobody was injured, nothing was damaged, and people thought, well, that's that. Now, those of you who remember, 1969 was the year when NASA sent men to the moon, and obviously space was in everybody's mind, so it caused a bit of a stir in this sleepy little town in Victoria. So what does, and this is the critical question, what does the Murchison meteorite and the struggle for universal human rights have in common? You see, the little Murchison meteorite was Aladdin's cave of discovery. It's the oldest meteorite that's ever landed on planet Earth. But more importantly, scientific teams around the world have been studying this meteorite for over 50 years, and they've discovered the essential elements of life. Now, as I said at the beginning, it's raining. Water is an essential element of life. Water, sugar, alcohol, amino acids, all the things necessary to create life, to create protein. And in 2017, a Japanese scientific team highlighted the 5 elements that are needed to create DNA, which is basically the message which is transmitted into all living creatures, which defines what they are, were incorporated in the meteorite. Now, initially the meteorite was thought to be 4.5 billion years old. It was created during the period when the solar system was being created and planets like planet Earth. But analysis in 2019 has highlighted that it is the oldest piece of material ever found on planet Earth. It's over 7 billion years old. Because within the meteorite is stardust, that very element that's necessary for life. So here we have the Murchison meteorite. A little piece of rock broke up into hundreds, if not thousands, of fragments, studied for over 50 years, and it's found to have everything within it which can create life, create DNA, create protein. So, what's that got to do with universal human rights? Well, the struggle for universal human rights, like the Murchison meteorite, is dead. Dead as a dodo. Today, that struggle, which began in the 18th century, seems to have fallen off the face of the earth as far as political activity is concerned. It's all about rights for specific groups within society, not rights for each and every one of us. And to a significant degree, the carnage we see in the world today and the growing inequalities are directly linked to that failure of the struggle to create communities and societies where human rights are universal, where they belong to each and every individual within that community, irrespective of who they are and what they do. So the dilemma we face today is much more difficult than the dilemma of the Murchison meteorite. Through scientific analysis over 5 decades, the story which is ingrained within this rock, these pieces of rock, is slowly being understood. And we now know that the drive to create life is as old as the universe itself. But as far as universal human rights is concerned, that struggle failed. And it's failed despite the efforts of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who've been involved in that struggle over hundreds of years. And it's failed for one or two very good reasons. Because rights are intrinsically linked to wealth and power. That's right. It's all very well to pass legislation to bestow rights of individuals and communities through a legal framework or a constitutional framework. But the fact is, while there are inequalities in power and wealth, the ability to exercise rights which we may have in law, which we don't have in Australia, in law, will never be able to be fully explored unless we become involved in that struggle to devolve power, that's share power, and to use the Commonwealth for the common good. And that's the central dilemma. It's not the fact that we don't have the capacity to do this. The Murchison meteorite had the capacity to create life. It has all the elements within it which are necessary to create living, breathing, animate, biological entities. It's all there. It took time to decode it, but it's all there. And it's the same with the struggle for universal human rights. It's inequality, both in power and wealth, which create most of the issues that we face today. And unless we are able to dissect, analyse, and then put forward methods of living together, economic entities which give us that ability to exercise universal human rights, then inequalities will continue to exist. So it's not as if we don't have the capacity. There have been communities in the past, and obviously there may be some communities in the present, where inequalities have shrunk. And there are communities where inequalities have increased dramatically. And that's a dilemma. That's the dilemma we face in the 21st century. The total failure of parliamentary democracy to be able to allow people to have access to universal human rights. And that has occurred because the parliamentary system has been usurped by a small group that own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication, who manipulate the system in order to ensure the power they have, the power they're able to exercise, continues to reside in their hands. Because you see, democracy is not just about rule of the people, by the people, for the people, by an engaged public. It's also creating a society where the greatest number are able to live the best life they can. And currently, this has disappeared. And to a significant degree, what we are seeing in the world today, especially in more economically sophisticated societies, what we are seeing is a concentration of power and wealth in fewer and fewer hands. And this concentration of power and wealth in fewer and fewer hands is increasing inequalities, is removing the ability of not only individuals to have the capacity to exercise universal human rights, but it's removed the ability of the political structures we have created to ensure that the greatest number have the greatest good. And that's the dilemma. If our structures have failed the greatest number, and then people will be looking for alternatives. What's the point of continuing to have the same structures which give us the same end result? What's the point of supporting established political parties who deliver the same results? Because their very existence is dependent on support from the 1% that own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication. Time and time again, we see political parties that have programs to introduce rights and even universal human rights for the people they rule, not being able to actually change reality, irrespective of the legislative process. So like the Murchison meteorite, which has everything necessary for the creation of human life, we don't have everything necessary to ensure that we create a society where power is devolved and shared, where wealth is held in common and used for the common good. So the atrocities we see on a daily basis, where people destroy each other because of religious beliefs, political opinions, will continue until we are able to closely look at what's happening in our society. Now, there are moments in human histories where things radically change, and they radically change for a variety of reasons. But the most important reason is the current structures which are there do not provide the maximum gain for the greatest number of people. We are now at that position in life. But because of a centralised, virtual and legacy media, Because these platforms are either owned by the state or owned by corporations whose major responsibility is to make ever-increasing profits for their owners or shareholders. Because it's much easier to turn on the newcomer, somebody with a different religion, a different sexual orientation, a different analysis on gender, much easier to turn on each other. What we are seeing is the growth of political and social and cultural movements which isolate us from each other. And although we now have the technical innovations which allow us to see anything or most things that are happening in the world instantly, and although we have the technological means to send people to Mars, and although we have the technological means to access the knowledge of the universe through technology, as far as our arrangements are concerned in terms of the way we live and the way our society is structured, we are now back in the dark ages. Parliamentary democracy has failed. Dictatorships only help that small cadre which is involved in that dictatorship. Religious bigotry leads to hatred and death. Nationalism creates tension and war. We are at an important juncture as far as human existence is concerned. Not only have we soiled our nest, and our very existence as a species is now dependent on us making radical changes, we have now reached a period in human history where we need to once again look at universal human rights, look at how to create a society where universal human rights are enjoyed by all. And that means that we need to become involved in that struggle to devolve or share power, possibly through direct democratic means, and the struggle to hold wealth in common and use it for the common good. And let's not forget, we do live in the Commonwealth of Australia, and the tragedy is that in this rich country with a minuscule population compared to the 8 billion that are living on this planet, we as a people have not only not been able to reconcile with this country's First Nations people. As a people, what we've seen over the last 40 to 50 years is an increase in pauperisation of an increasing number of people. What we have become is a people who worship Mammon, who have no capacity or minimal capacity to do the work that is necessary to create a society where wealth and power is held in common and universal human rights become the birthright of every human being that is born.